Alan Quinlan. Good morning to you.
Good morning.
How are you going?
Good, thanks.
You were threatening again this morning to wrap the hell up and let you at it. Fair enough. Well, I like to see that sort of enthusiasm. You probably haven't read the Joe Schmidt book just yet. It's only been out during the week. There's been some of the early reports, including Rory O'Connor here, doesn't speak hugely about it, but I think that people were interested to see what he might say about what happened at the World Cup, or particularly over the last year, and it doesn't feel like there's a huge amount of information on that necessarily. One thing that he has commented on was the non-selection of Devin Toner for the World Cup, and he's saying that obviously there was an incident in one of the World Cup warm-up games which they understood was potentially going to lead to, there was some sort of a view that it might lead to a sighting.
Yeah.
And obviously that didn't materialise in the end. Your thoughts on the it's obviously Joe Schmidt's version of events as to whether it's a nice bit of a retrofit of an excuse or actually there's merit in it?
Well, I'd heard that at the time when after that game, it was the game over in Cardiff, that there was a clear out from Devin Toner, which in certainly in European rugby or in if it was at the World Cup, he would have been cited. He wasn't actually cited after the game, and I heard that that was a concern and a worry in the 24, 48 hours after the game. I know he had probably an ankle injury. I think it was an ankle injury over the summer, so he hadn't played or trained as much as well. So there was a couple of factors there. And look, if that's what they were thinking, it's not for me to kind of say that. There has to be reasons when you pick and drop a player. Obviously, sometimes this comes down to actually what they're doing on the field, and I think
Devin, well, they've been able to bring him in and then say that he was injured after a while, like pre-tournament, and swap him out without any repercussions.
Yeah, if he was in, but look, I'd say it was more to that. That probably added to the doubt about him going, and I know there was an inclination about, and I'd heard this myself, and obviously because the World Cup hasn't been successful, all these things are being questioned, and I'll be honest with you, it's not for, like, if Joe is saying that, and I had heard it, you got to take him for his word at that, that probably added to, so I don't think it can't be the sole reason. I think there was obviously, Klein had trained pretty well over the summer and was pretty active in all the sessions they did and made a bit of an impression. He didn't back that up on the field, which you look back and it then potentially it's the wrong call, because when you back someone and pick them and select them for a tournament like that, you would hope they'll deliver for you. But I think the reason that Joe was saying there about the potential sighting, it's probably a little bit unlike Joe in a sense that stuff that's out of your control, that he says that a lot, but part of me just thinks it's unfair the way it's just the way the world World Cup has been disappointing, and lots of the journalists are gonna pick through the stuff. And look, that's the job of I'm in that world myself, and we'll have Joe on Monday morning and we'll be picking through stuff that he says in it. But there's probably going to be a lot more pieces that are going to come out throughout the book.
Yeah. The one thing that I want to ask about, obviously ahead of the weekend of Heineken Cup, as we head into it, Munster Racing obviously tomorrow evening, 5:30, Tubber Park. Munster with the late bonus point win at the Ospreys, and Racing thumping what's essentially Saracens' second team last weekend. Talk about the dynamic of the game in a minute, but since we're on second rows, Donnacha Ryan, obviously he's coming back to Munster. I was surprised to read during the week it's the first time since he's been back here. He's played Munster twice. First time since he's been back here since he went away. If he hadn't gone away and he was playing, because he's 36 now, I think, still playing very well, fit as a fiddle, would he be a starter for that Irish team if he was available?
Yes, I think he would have been.
And Ryan would have started.
Probably, I think they're the most. Well, look, Ian Henderson's a very, very talented player, I think, and I think there's certainly more in Ian Henderson at times. Some days he's outstanding. I think it's that grit and that aggression and maybe that confrontational style that you get from Donnacha Ryan, which I would want from a bit more from Ian Henderson. I'm sure it's something that Andy Farrell will chat to him about, and he's a brilliant player, absolutely brilliant player. But I would just like to see him being a bit more confrontational. And Donncha Ryan, I think, I played with Donncha. I know the character, I know the type of person he is, I know the engine he has. And like any player, he has flaws or things that he's not brilliant at. But one thing he is brilliant at is enthusiasm, energy, work rate is through the roof. And he's matured as he's got older into a real leader. I think he was someone in the early parts of his career who would have wanted everything to be perfect and would have been probably his own worst enemy at times, beating himself up if something went wrong. He's matured into an incredible leader, and I think he would have learned a lot off Paul and Donncha, who he would have played with under in Munster, Mick O'Driscoll. And he's a real presence on the field, and he's kind of a spiritual leader for Racing. When he plays, they seem to gel together. And it was really interesting because I was looking back at stuff during the week that he even said last year about the different culture in France, and I chatted to Mike Prendergast about this. It's just that ability to play cup rugby at sometimes and be in the moment and understand about, you know, if a mistake happens that you can't let it snowball and get worse. And they're the kind of things they'll be saying to the Racing players, even though a lot of these Racing players have played in Thomond Park in recent years. They'll know it's a different place. It's just different than for those guys playing in France themselves. I know going away in France can be very, very tricky as well. So there's an ambition within him. And the one thing about Donncha is he's the kind of fella he's so competitive. If it is a game of indoor soccer or a game of chess or whatever, he has that natural drive and desire to win. So going back to your question at the start, he's someone who maybe not, it's unfair to say he'd be a guaranteed starter, but he'd be thereabouts because of his quality and his leadership role now.
He's 3 years into a 2-year deal over there, which probably tells you everything you need to know about where he's at in terms of his game. Where are Racing at in terms of like the club at the minute? When you looked at that group initially, it looked like like the group of death. We were talking about it last week as being the group of death. That's rapidly dissipating as a notion. Even looking at Racing's, like they've had 2 good wins recently, but Stade Francais are not what they were, and Saracens at the minute are not what they should be. Like, where's that Racing team? It's hard
to kind of, we'll know more tomorrow. Munster were, and I was listening to Felipe Contepomi this morning, and it's very true. I think the provinces can't get ahead of themselves because they're still quite rusty, and you know, Leinster were you know, sloppy at times last week against Benetton. Munster were away against a weak Osprey side. So I think they've got to be careful that they don't get ahead of themselves. I think reintegrating the internationals, and I was one of those players on a number of occasions over the years, whether it's the Block and Six Nations or World Cups, it can be tricky because it's a complete new set of calls. They've got to kind of get up to speed with what's happening in their provinces and not add value rather than add confusion, if you like, by coming back and taking any sort of control. And, you know, Racing have had 12 players come back, 12 or 13 guys come back into their squad in the last couple of weeks, and hence they get a bonus point win against Stade Francais and a bonus point win against Racing. And they've been struggling while their internationals were away. So it's hard to judge where they're at now. One of the things I think, and it's kind of going back to that cultural bit, is I think Jackie Lorenzetti is trying to get away from the massive marquee signings of, you know, spending massive money on big, trying to buy players in. He wants to try and get sustainability and bring players through their academy system and create a real kind of good standard there. And Travers has done that as a coach. So I think they're a side. It's hard to judge them against Saracens last week because of the team Saracens had out. So it'll be interesting to see how they perform in Thomond Park tomorrow.
Yeah, and how will they? What's going to happen?
Yeah, I think they're very, very dangerous. I think they're even more dangerous than even when Rog was there, because, you know, Mike Prendergast is coming as assistant coach, and it's the 2 players out in the field. I think you could nearly bank on Zebo scoring a try and doing something brilliant or having a great game tomorrow. for various different reasons, his own motivation, and obviously the history of the place and playing there, and the crowd just love him. And I wonder, will he do one of these soccer celebrations if he scores, that he'll kind of...
He has to do because he's just had a new baby, hasn't he? So he's got to do the sort of sucking the tongue.
But look, at the end of the day, if you're a player and you're playing with any team, you come back to your home, it's different. So I think Munster will probably have enough to win the game, and I think they'll be better from after that bonus point win last week, but certainly they won't underestimate Racing in any way. It's just very hard to judge them, Adrian, because, you know...
I think they're a weaker proposition and Munster should beat them, I think.
Yeah, I think on paper they were probably stronger before, in a sense that they probably had some bigger names before, but there's some, you know, there's some very, very good players. Vakatawa in the centre, if you give him any sort of time and space, he's lethal, and he showed that with a brilliant line for that try last week. And they're not fearful anymore. Racing are a side now that went to, you know, can go on the road and cause teams problems. But Munster have got to be very, very careful. If Finn Russell is on song, he gets good quality ball, he can cut teams open. So from a defensive point of view tomorrow, I think it's really important that Munster frustrate them and stop their flow and get in their faces. And then, you know, you hope that they'll be able to grind out a result. And, you know, you mentioned the pool of death at the start. It was the pool of death, and it's changing a little bit as it goes on. And you think if Munster get a win tomorrow, 2 from 2 is a brilliant start for them, and then they've got the back-to-back ones against Sarries. So it's a
handy pool, as it turns out, is what we're saying.
Handy pool. Yeah.
Do you think Simon Zebo would ever come home? Like, there's always talk about the IRFU changing and that rule changing. Would Zebo ever say, "Listen, I'm packing my stuff in France"? I know he's 29 now, so...
Yeah, I'm not sure what is he. He's up at the end of the season, isn't he? So I'm presuming he's in negotiating. He's either negotiating now with Racing or to come back. You know, I'd love to see him come back. I'm sure Munster people would love to see him come back, and it would be, you know, he'd be back maybe in the Irish mix again. Who knows if there was an announcement pre-Christmas that he's coming back to Munster next year, would he be brought into the Six Nations squad in the new year? But
even from Munster's perspective, it's separate to the IRFU. It's like it'd be a great signing.
I think you know, with Mike Haley, he's the full back, and they probably have a fair few back three players, and it's down to budgets, and it's down to the squad budget and how many they can bring into that, because, you know, if Zebo comes back, he'd command a big figure, and so it's down to the simple maths of finances. But I think it'd be brilliant to see him come back.
Mm-hmm. The other one obviously we wanted to talk about is Lyon against Leinster tomorrow afternoon, France. Leinster's bonus point win at home to Benetton last weekend, and Lyon beaten at the Saints, maybe somewhat surprisingly, in another team who are sort of hard to get your head around, obviously, with the international players coming back. It seems like, according to, I think it might be Cian Tracy in the Irish Independent this morning, that Rob Kearney is going to be selected at fullback here. The Warren Gatland tour of interviews, at one point he had said that he, in relation to the Irish team, it might have been on here actually, that he said 1 or 2 players were past it, was what he was saying, that in terms of the explanation of what happened to Ireland there. Now, it wouldn't be a great stretch to think, rightly or wrongly, that Rob Kearney would have been one of those players, given his age profile that he might have been talking about. But he's back. It looks like back in that Leinster team this weekend, and I'm assuming from his own point of view, still feeling that he has a lot to offer this Leinster side.
Yeah, he has, and I think if when you get over your 30s and you're not maybe standing out and playing as well, there's always going to be scrutiny. I had it in my last few years, signing yearly contracts with Munster near the end, and of course the little spotlight's going to go straight on the older players straight away, and it's something he had to deal with a couple of years ago, and he's a lot of miles on the clock. He can't go on forever, and it's up to him now to if he wants to keep going. He's in his last year with Leinster. He signed an extension, so he's up at the end of the year as well. So what Rob Kearney's achieved in the game has just been unbelievable. I think, you know, he's one of the few players who has the 2 Grand Slams, the Heineken Cup wins with Leinster, the championship wins, Triple Crowns, all that stuff. Huge amount of medals. But, you know, time kind of catches up.
It almost felt last week, was it Larmour that started at full-back last week, whoever it was, it almost felt at that point that, like, this is the moment that actually he...
Yeah, maybe, and it's, look, as I said, it's up to Rob Kearney to change that narrative, and he did it a number of years ago. It's probably 3 years ago, is it now, since Chicago, when he was under the same sort of pressure, and probably not scoring tries or making line breaks and standing out in games. And he had an incredible game that time, and had in that game against the All Blacks, and had a really positive run probably for the next 2 years. It's probably this year where the scrutiny is falling on loads of the more senior players with Ireland, and that's what happens, and rightly so. So he's kind of, you feel he's kind of playing now for his future if he wants to continue playing.
Give us a couple of quick sort of summations here of, very briefly, in terms of who's going to get it done this weekend.
I can't do briefly.
Leon, well, I'm going to push you now. Leon, Leinster.
I think Leinster will win. I think they've been going really well in the top 14, Leon. They're top of the table. They've won 8 out of 9. But I just think Leinster have that mentality to go to France and not be scared by the prospect. Now, Leon will be a totally different prospect than they were away in Northampton last week. And I know from Pierre Mignoni, speaking to him, I played in the Babas team with him a good few years ago, but they're quite ambitious to do well. They won no game in Europe last year, but I still just think Leinster have that winning mentality and that experience to go there and win. But it's not going to be easy. That could be a very, very kind of tricky, tight game for Leinster.
Everything's turning out Millhouse for Connacht at the minute, obviously, with the signings and the game last weekend, and it's Toulouse, who they have a bit of history against.
They just need Bundy Aki to sign now, and I think the talks are more positive on that, and after getting Marmion to sign, I think it's a big... They need to be bringing in players rather than losing them, but they've so many players injured, and more players this week. Dennis Buckley is out this week. There's talk that the man Conor Fitzgerald will start at 10 instead of Jack Carty. So they're stretched to the bare limit, but it's going to be very, very difficult.
Toulouse, you're saying?
Toulouse, yeah. I think Toulouse will probably win that.
Ulster Clermont tonight?
Well, this is... Clermont were superb last week against Harlequins, and they can do that to anyone at home. But I just have a feeling that Ulster are kind of turning the page a little bit and building a little bit of depth in their character there with that group. Again, Jack McGrath, Sam Carter and Rob Little are out, so they're kind of stretched there, and particularly Carter and McGrath are big physical guys with experience who will be a loss. If they can mix it and get a good platform up front, I think they'll get a win tonight against Clermont, which will be a big statement, because Clermont are a team that a lot of people are fancying to win the tournament.
And Munster handy?
I don't know. I think Munster will be incredibly... It sounds quite obvious, but this is their season, really. You lose this game and it's very, very difficult, you know. So I think that will probably ignite them to do enough to be able to get a result.
You know, you get a mention in Ordinary Joe. Did you know this?
No.
Are you concerned about it, do you think, or are you sort of like this might sort of go my way?
He never coached me anyway, so he can't give... He couldn't be giving out about my attitude or my techniques in training. Le Drop here in the Grand Slam year, and he's talking about a slip down the tunnel afterwards towards the dressing room. Alan Quinlan shook my hand and said that he expressed a fair bit of frustration about the refereeing performance in his commentary, and that we'd done incredibly well to win despite the conditions and the pressure. That's it. That's it. That's my lot. I didn't expect any mention because, as I said, Joe didn't coach me.
Yeah. Holds you in high regard, though, Quinny. I mean, that's what I'm...
Yeah.
He didn't shake Adrian's hand last time he saw him.
He blanked you, did he?
I don't know. Trying to stir the pot here.
Enjoy the games.
3 wins out of 4 for the weekend.
That's what you're going for. Connacht to let the side down.
I have to say, I met Andy Friend yesterday and did an event with him, and what a top person. I think what he's done in Connacht is... His positivity is just unbelievable, and I'm sure at times he gives them a bit of a rollicking when they need it, but I think he's a breath of fresh air, and just in fairness, he said to me, nobody thinks we'll win in Toulouse, which is fair enough. Yeah. Except us.
All right.
So
good attitude. James has been in touch to say that Adrian Barry's a very rude journalist. He's managed to insult Jose, Wenger and Poch in the first 10 minutes. Have some respect, man. You're talking about men who've forgotten more.
We're in full agreement.
Couldn't agree more.
You're talking more about men who've forgotten more than you will ever know about football.
It's true, though.
We're in full agreement.
Oh, I know that. I mean, it's probably come from you, Quinny. James.
I'm tweeting or sending in the messages here under the table.